This is Michael Murray with another edition of Storytellers, the untold stories from Connecticut pool halls. We're here at Shooter's Billiards in Southington, Connecticut. And today we're with Sheryl Cohen Alexander, former Connecticut State 9-ball champion and longtime WPBA player.
Okay, Ray Gilbo was a player that was out of Classic Billiards in East Hartford. Okay. He's like our resident house pro. And Ray was his father. Okay. And Ray used to come down and play, and he took me aside and started giving me, some more advanced lessons about moving the cue ball. I already had, a stroke, and I was a shot maker, like somebody said, and I think it was Bobby, she's got talent, that was always what people would say, she's got talent, from the movie The Hustler. Yeah. And the other thing was, you shoot good for a girl. Oh. Didn't like that one, but I was the only girl. There were no women in Classic Billiards in East Hartford in 1976. And there really weren't any women in the pool room in Michigan State either, except for me. And I was working the counter my senior year, so that was my work-study job. That's awesome. Yeah, it was fun. And, I played out the Velvet Rail in Lansing with Joe Farhat, who was also a huge promoter of the game. And he sold me my first cue, my Viking, when I ran a rack, in straight pool. It was a big deal, when you can run the whole rack, you can miss the break shot. So I got my first nice cue, Viking, and but Hal was probably, let's see, wow, we were all so young. When I met Bobby, we were both in our early 20s. So, Hal was probably in his 50s or 60s. And, yep, he took me aside, along with Bob Hayward, who was another Connecticut player. He took me aside and tried to show me the ropes of straight pool. Really more about moving the cue ball. I remember the day that I learned low left English. I was, every shot, I got to put low left on it. I got to make that, I got to get that spin. And I saw a recent video on YouTube, the 10 different spots of draw. And I was like, oh my God, I mean, I had, maybe 3 or 4, but 10? It depends if you're starting from center ball or not. So, I didn't have anything like that. I didn't have a YouTube. I had the Billiard Digest. So whenever there were instructional articles about whatever, I can't remember who did them. I think Grady Matthews might have been one of that's why they called him the professor. And those were my teachers. Tim Brown, I finally remember his name. The monk. You don't know the monk? He wrote the book Point the Way. Okay. Really the first head game to come out first book to come out about the head game. And that made a big difference because I let myself be scared of a Gene Belucas or Lori John Oganowski and once I learned the way Bruce taught me was don't pay any attention to your opponent. Keep your eyes on the table, mind your own business. You're playing the table. When your opponent's up there, just watch the table. Do not look at your opponent. And once I got that down, that's when my game started to change. I just needed somebody to give me some confidence because I was flying solo. I didn't really want to, if there were women, a lot of them were hanging off the arms of one of the male players. And I didn't want to be that person. I was like Mary Tyler Moore. I was independent. I had my own apartment. I lived in Groton. I lived in New London. I worked at Pfizer in Groton. I had Gold Crown Billiards right in New London. Everything was perfect. And living with Cy and Dolly. So Hal Gilbo was one of my first teachers.
Okay.
Bobby Hunt used to come into East Hartford. He used to float around between East Hartford and New London because he used to have the pool room in Old Saybrook in the bowling alley. And they used to call him Saybrook Bob. But he would wander in to East Hartford every once in a while. He usually came in to play Ray Gilbo, one pocket. And if there was nobody there, I would beg him to play me. Please, please. And he would just kind of laugh and humor me. And then he finally gave in and said, okay, we're going to play straight pool. I'm going to go to 50. You're going to go to 40. And I would get up and he broke usually. I can't remember. I don't remember how we worked out the break. But I think he broke just to give me one shot. And I never beat him. No. No, there were often times that he just ran out, 50 and out. But I got to sit there and watch him for free and rack. And so that's how I learned. I learned by watching other players.
Oh, yeah. That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, the better player. I always found that you play against better players, you're going to be better.
That's what I always did. If I could get a game, I'm not a gambler, so I'm like a Shane Van Boning. I don't like it. I had a job. I had a car. I had an apartment. I had bills to pay. Yeah. This was a side job. I mean, something that I loved doing, but not financially profitable, especially back then. So, and I had just graduated from college and come home, and Mom was like, get a job. Even though I would have wanted to play pool all the time and go on the road and do that crazy life. But yeah, it wasn't in my blood to be that way. And my mother probably would have had heart failure had I done that. But yeah. They enjoyed my playing. They used to come down to London for the tournaments. And it was nice to have them there with me. That's when I quit. I lost my parents in '85, 3 months apart. Yeah, and I remember Lloyd John coming up to me and saying, where's your mother? My father had just come by himself, and it just happened. It happened right after Resorts, last call for 9-ball. Like 4 days later, she passed away from cancer. So, and then the next tournament was like a month later, and I told her she passed away, and uncomfortable, awkward moment, and it was just different not having Mom there. And because Dad was friends with Lori John's father. They made friends when they qualified for the Straight Pool Nationals in '79, and we went down to the thriving metropolis of Hamilton, New Jersey, in a catering hall. So my parents were sitting with Lori John's parents, and my dad was from Brooklyn, and I don't know what they talked about, but my dad and John just clicked. And so every time we went to a tournament, John was always with Lori John, because she was only 13 when I met her. And so there was that relationship there, and that was gone. And then 3 months later, Dad went, and I couldn't go. I could just looking into the bleachers, not seeing them there, and things in my job had changed. I had a new territory. We were building a house. I had to get serious. And Cy and Dolly closed the room. They retired in '86. So it all kind of happened together. And I said, okay, I don't have a room. I tried some other rooms, but like Q and Brew, but it is kind of, Q and Brew is kind of a long ride. And so there was a period from the end of '85 up until '90. I got bitten in '86. As soon as we bought the land, I got bitten the first time, and then I got bitten again in the spring. So by '87, when we Lyme.
Oh.
Yeah, my land is covered with Lyme ticks.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and I didn't know because they didn't tell anybody what, the where, the when, the how, So I had no idea. I never saw any rash. I never saw any tick. Sure, we pulled 1 million ticks off the dogs, but so by 1986, we're in the middle of building a house. I'm in the middle of a new territory. I had previously been traveling southeastern Connecticut, and then all of Rhode Island and southeastern Mass. So east of, is it 95? That goes all the way through? Or I think I used to take 495 and go out to the Cape because I had Falmouth Hospital, and I used to go out to Martha's Vineyard. So back then, the road didn't even cut all the way through. You had to take that back road and then sit to wait over to get that Bourne Bridge, I think it was called. And, you know, my job, I really enjoyed being on my own, you know, and there were no cell phones back then, so I could hide if I had to, or, you know, slip out early, start out late. But I somehow got involved with Mike X from Country Club Billiards in New Bedford. And he was another big promoter of the game. And I didn't have many customers down there, but I used to do an overnight down there and then spend the night in the pool room. I'm not working anymore. You can't take the money back. Take my disability check. But gosh, I had a lot of fun down there playing. Still, again, the only woman in the room, but Dawn Hopkins was starting. I knew that she was in Boston, and Joanne I ran into about 84, 85. There was a couple of women in New London when I first moved there, but they both left, and I never saw them again in the game. So really, until 85, 86, I never saw another woman, except for Joanne. I was audacious. I would beg Bobby mercilessly, "Play me, Bobby, please, play me," and he humored me. And he didn't humor anybody else, but me he humored, and I appreciate that. And I watched him in action all the time too. You know, I have a hard time following one pocket because I'm always on the wrong side of the table when I try to play it. You know, I don't know the safeties. I don't know the banks. It's really a game I think you have to get good at, gambling. You know, where you put in long sessions, and then you learn the safeties.
You learn the hard way by costing you money.
Yeah. And, you know, sitting there watching them bang one ball around for an hour sometimes, right. I'd start going insane. Now, I had a hard enough time with straight pool, and finally in 81, 82, they decided that the women shouldn't play straight pool anymore because we sucked, pretty much. Just couldn't get it down. Really didn't have the instruction, you know, the skills that the male players had, and I don't know why we couldn't. But
so would they just not allow women to
no, they couldn't. They sucked. They were terrible. We could barely get up to a 30 run, maybe. Yeah. You know, and that's not exciting, and it's a long match. And so they were starting a format for TV, and most people don't know straight pool. Yeah. So that's when they picked 9-ball, side picked 9-ball, and then they started running the 2 tournaments a year for the women and the 2 tournaments a year for the men. And that was like the most exciting thing, you know, that was happening in New London, because everybody from all over came. Irving Crane came, Jimmy Karras, trying to think of some of the older players. And then, of course, you know, Mizrak, Martin, Margot, Rempe, all of them, not the Southern players. They were all mostly Jersey players. Yeah. The Fuscos, sure. out of Philadelphia. Mostly Jersey, a little bit of New York. Even New York wasn't putting out that many players. Amsterdam Billiards hadn't opened yet. So I started beating players that were good. And I had enough finishes high up. They weren't first. Mrs. Belucas pretty much owned first place back then. Lori John beat her once or twice. And then in the East, I qualified because of the Eastern States.
All women?
All women.
Okay.
Yeah. This was the WPBA.
Okay.
And run by Billy Billings back then. And I guess I had enough points. I forgot. I used to go down to Jersey and play in Mike Ash's room, IQ Billiards. And there were just a lot of tournaments. And, you know, I had a decent enough finish that I qualified for it. And so I got a lot of publicity back then. And they did a story. My sister called up the Hartford Courant and kind of tattled on me. And suddenly Owen Canfield, the sports editor for the Hartford Courant, is calling me up, telling me he wants to interview me. And the caption on the interview was "Calamity Jane with a pool cue," because I'm a little accident prone. Like, I've broken my nose and I've had like double-digit concussions and you fall. You know, I chose sports like horses and skiing, which were injury prone anyway, and I was a little wild on the mountain, and the pickup truck was an accident. I was in the back loading boxes. I was working at the Red Cross, and the Easter Seal Rehab used to make the boxes that we put the blood in. So we were over in the back of the pickup truck, and I didn't have good shoes on, and there wasn't a mat in there, and I had my back to the side right up in front by the cab, and I just, all of a sudden, this thought flashed through my mind: what if you were to fall out? I went over just like a scuba diver, right down onto my butt, and it was a full-size pickup, and that was the beginning and end of my back. And I didn't stop playing. I kept going. I absolutely refused to go down in pain. I lived in pain. I was used to pain. I said, okay, this is just another pain, but it was quite a bit more. And I struggled with that through my pool career, especially in a tournament. As we proceeded through the day, I would start to run out of steam, start to be in pain. Sometimes when I would start playing, I would forget about it, but when the fatigue set in, playing with Lyme, I just kind of, I had to give in to it. I couldn't keep going. I couldn't think. It was hard for me to read. It was hard for me to do anything once the pain started. So, but in '89, I pushed my back finally too far, and I ruptured 3 discs in my back. And I had to have back surgery, the major back surgery back then. And my boss called me up because he lived up in Norwood, Mass. And I said, Steve, I'm never going to be 100% again. And he said, okay, well, Merck's long-term disability policy is you either turn 65, get better, or get a new job. And I was 34. And I was going to get 60% of my pay, and I was going to be retired. I was out walking, and I thought, pool moves the body a lot. I mean, I could have done exercises in a PT office, but those are all the exercises I would have done on a pool table. I had a nice tight stomach I had what was called a half stance. If you ever saw the shorter, stockier players like Mosconi or Karras in a picture, they weren't all the way down in their stroke. We're so close to the table already, like with Bruce, Laurie John, the long, thin frame. You'd see the cue. You ever seen players rub their cue on their chin? Nah, I tried it. I didn't like it. I wasn't built for it. You had to have long arms and a long body. So I used to kind of be neurotic about it. I also used to shoot with a bent arm. And so those are things I had to clean up as far as, the basics. And then once I got that going, I started working on the head game, and that's when things really started coming together. So playing pool, we went down to, I think we ran into Bobby in New London. It was now owned by somebody else, and it was icky. The walls were covered in photographs of everyone that had come and played there since 1961 when he opened. So it was like a wall of fame. It was, you'd be sitting there playing, you'd look behind you, and there's Willie Mosconi over your shoulder, and Irving Crane, and Luther Lassiter, and then, Jim Rempe, and just, you were surrounded. And then the women, too, also, all over the walls, no matter where we played. And it was an amazing room, the way Cy and Dolly treated pool players and treated us with respect and promoted the sport, and for both the men and the women. And those tournaments, I used to referee. He'd pay us $5 for 9-ball, $10 for a game of straight pool because they were playing to 150. And I would sit there and I would rack the balls and try to remember the ball runs. Sometimes I kind of took my mind off it a second and I was like, uh-oh, are we on 81, 82? You know, I mean, I had it on the table, you know, but I was trying to remain professional and everybody had a pitcher of water next to them and of course the ashtray. Because we could smoke, but we couldn't drink. There's no liquor in any of my pool rooms.
Really?
No, not until Player's Choice in '90. So that's what happened. Is I started playing. Bobby told us about Player's Choice. We went down to New Haven, and where it was, it's right across the green by Yale, downtown on Chapel Street, and it had just this doorway. They had no front because it was in the back of the building, and so you kind of went down this hallway. It kind of reminded me of The Color of Money a bit, you know, when they walked down that hallway in whatever room that they were in. And then you walk in, and it had a bar, which was new for me. And the pool area was sunken down. So, you know what I mean? Like a sunken living room. And then up above, there were tables, and they served food. And it was an entirely new concept for me to have alcohol involved in the game, because I don't drink. And I prefer to play with people that aren't drinking. But I started my game, I remembered it. And actually, my brain had matured to the point where I seemed to know more. Even though I had taken 5 years off, it's like, you know, you never forget how to ride a bike. Apparently, you never forget how to play pool. And I was practicing in the basement, and I had people coming over and playing at our house all the time. We had, you know, because everybody in the area knew me. Especially when I got in, that's when I got into the APA too. So there was kind of a love-hate relationship with the folks down there. They didn't want me in there. They called me a sandbagger. They said I was a pro. They said, "What are you doing playing in an amateur? You're a pro." I said, "I'm not a pro anymore." You know, I mean, technically, I'm still a member of the WPBA. I'm still the regional secretary or manager or whatever they name me. But no, I wasn't playing as a pro anymore. And there were other women that I played with that were coming to these tournaments. Dawn Hopkins, she's the one that set it up. And thus began the Women's All About Pool Tour. And I did that from the first tournament I played in was down in Bridgeport. And I do not remember the pool room's name, but I didn't know that anybody. I knew Billy Billings and I knew Frank Kirby. Those were the only two players at that tournament that I still knew. Everybody else was new. I didn't know who Jeanette Lee was. And of course, I was winning. And Bruce was actually refereeing in that tournament. And they had him referee my match with Jeanette. And I noticed people were starting to collect around the table. And you know, I mean, we were getting along in the tournament, so there weren't that many matches going on, and the pool gods all showed up for me. I made 2 9s on the break. I was caroms, jump shots, everything rolled my way, and Jeanette could not get a roll, and I beat her 7-2. I didn't even know who she was, you know, and then the next time I met her in Rhode Island, she just kind of latched on to me. Being friends, she was so young, she was only 20, you know, and she was really very nice and very kind, but she always had this look like, I want to cut your throat, you know, I really want to kick your ass, you know, and unfortunately afterwards she did, but we were playing the Rhode Island State Championship, and that room, Snookers, had just gotten their liquor license. And we used to go to 1 a.m. We knock off the tournaments in one day. And Jeanette and I were in the finals. There's past 1, the Providence police show up. You can't be open because you have a liquor license. You're supposed to be closed at 1 a.m. And we're telling them, this is the Rhode Island State 9-ball championship. everybody has to leave. And we said, we can't leave. This is the finals. We've been playing for 12 hours, for goodness sakes. We can't leave. She lives in New York, and I had Jamie Patterson with me. We were traveling together back then. And so the cops threw everybody out of the room except the owners, Jeanette, myself, and Jamie. And we played out the finals all by ourselves. Jeanette, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I was playing with Lyme disease and a bad back. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, I was a little spent. She was on her way up. I was on my way down. I still put together a decent game. But I ran into Jeanette on more than one occasion. I played her up in New Hampshire. So I got her that one time, that first time.
What time did you guys get out of that tournament?
Probably about 1:45, and the cops stayed the whole time. They were insanely mad. You can't be open. You're going to lose your liquor license. And I don't remember the owners of Snookers, a very nice couple, and we were all just basically begging them, please let us finish. And we did, and got a nice trophy for second place. And, crawled home at 2 in the morning after playing pool all day and getting up at the crack of dawn and driving to the tournaments. Those were some seriously hard days for not much money, unfortunately.
I bet. Okay,
I beat Lori when people weren't beating Lori. She was already a world champ. She was taking everybody down on the McDermott tour. And she's a tough girl from Detroit, and I befriended her. I was always like that. I always liked to make friends with those women that wanted to be social. There was, cliques of the top players. But Lucas always stayed to herself. She came up with her brother Paul, and she was usually in the hotel room if she wasn't shooting. And when she was shooting, she had the best poker face ever. There was no emotions. There was the slightest discontent if she made a mistake. She was just on such a higher level than everybody else. But in that particular tournament, I was going through. I beat Vicky Paskey, who was the ACUA national champion. Debbie Smith, may she rest in peace. Also a top player. We became good friends. And then I came up against Shampoo. And the year before I had played her, and she had trounced me. But Bruce had taken me aside and given me that pep talk, saying, you can beat her, keep your head on the table. I remember, and don't let her shark you. And I remember her coming up to me when I first saw her at that tournament, and she said, well, how are you shooting? And I said, I'm shooting great. You want to come and shark me? Okay, I'll give it right back to you. And as it turned out, positive affirmations, I did. And it was a close match, but nobody ever expected me to win that. Then she went on to beat Belucas in the finals. So it was Shampoo, Belucas, and I was third. So it was a very hard-earned third place, and that's one of the reasons I qualified for the 9-ball nationals in '84. I think that's the first tournament that Joanne went to. It was down in Jersey, and Willie Moscone called me out of the audience. He did an exhibition before the tournament, and I think actually Lori John beat Belucas in that tournament. But anyway, it was funny because they were taping for TV, and we just didn't have a big enough audience. We had state, bleachers all the way around, but there were only enough to fill maybe 2 parts of the bleachers. So everybody was, moving us so that we filled up the one corner where they had the camera. And I was just sitting off to the side. I was in a mood, and Moscone set up the trick shot. The 4-ball trick shot where you just shoot through the middle. Oh, no, I think it's, what does it go? Side pocket, corner. Right. Okay, all you gotta do is hit it. And, and I was just kind of sitting there minding my business. And, he always would, in all the exhibitions I saw, they'd always do that trick shot and then pull somebody from the audience to make it. And he pulled me from the audience, and I was stunned. But I came down and, did my thing, got my stroke down, and he kind of gave me a nod, like he thought he was going to have to tell me what to do. And I just got down on the table, played the shot, and shook hands with him and walked away. And that was very cool. My interaction with Willie Mosconi. What a very kind and gentlemanly man he was. Very professional. It changed. There were a lot of gamblers back then, and I didn't gamble. And people would repeatedly say to me, "You can't get better if you don't gamble." And that just didn't ring true with me. And I was a student of the game, like learning chess. I was so eager to learn more, and I couldn't get enough. And I was in the pool room every night, and I was always trying to get a game. And I had my crew that we would play for time, maybe 5, a short game to 50, a straight pull. But I was starting to lean over more towards 9-ball because it was easier to think through a rack of 9-ball than through a rack of straight pool. And then once I started playing 9-ball, I really started hitting the balls good. Finished second down in New York. I lost to Lori John. So that was the New York State Championship. I was looking at my trophies this morning. I finished second up in New Hampshire. We're into the 90s. So I've just had my back surgery. I'm on long-term disability, and I'm so paranoid that Merck's gonna send spies out to my house to see if, I actually did have somebody from my life insurance company come because I had a waiver on my life insurance policy that if I became disabled, they would pay for it. And they actually came to the house one day. It was a beautiful summer day, nice and hot. They came at noon. And Bruce had to roll me out of bed because I started sleeping more and more. And I don't even think I could put my shoes on yet. And as I kind of came out, he had them outside on the porch. And he saw how I was moving, and he saw I was carrying my shoes, and that I was, not awake. And that was it. They gave me a waiver, and I've had free life insurance since then. Yes, and then Merck gave me all the benefits. For a while there, I was paying for nothing for my prescriptions. Merck drugs were always free. And back then, I was on a few of them. And back then, my benefits were amazing. A disability check. Then they talked me into applying for Social Security in '92 because I would get raises. Yeah, big raises. But I officially became disabled in 1992. I won the Connecticut State 9-ball in '92. And at that point, there was a gentleman in the room who wanted to sponsor me to go back on the tour, the WPBA. And I guess I'm too honest. I didn't want to get caught playing pool when I was supposed to be disabled. I'm like that. I don't cheat. I don't steal. I'm an intuitive empath, so I don't lie. And I know when people are lying. So I was always kind of paranoid about going too far back into the tour to where I might be noticed, although they never would have known. But we were playing the APA then as well, and a lot of the rooms had weekly tournaments on the slow nights, usually Monday or Tuesday. And there were a lot of, there was just a shoreline. So we had, quite a few bars in a small area that, we moved around to that would run usually an 8-ball tournament. And between Bruce and I, well, we were winning most of them. Either first and second, we'd split it. He always made me play it out, too. Can you believe that? Come on, let's just split the money and go. Oh, no, we got to play it out. But after a while, so I had a nice little income going on the side there. And then they started barring us from a couple of other bars. And they said, you're a pro. I had people kind of turning against me because they were getting angry. Because, Bruce had me handicapped as a 6. And I was playing really good. And I was riding the side of 7, but it took a lot to push somebody up to a 7 in 8 ball. And he didn't, and there's a lot of complaining. Especially when I played at Players' Choice and they had tournaments that were handicapped, they put me in as a C player. I said, cool, I'll be a C player. And then I would win, and then, oh boy, all the grumbling would start all over the place. And I had a good night. What do you want from me? You know, this was like 3 weeks after my back surgery. I got caught up in it again, and the tour was there, and I started traveling all over New England. I went down to Atlantic City for the last call for 9 ball. That was a pretty exciting event. Not portrayed as it is in The Color of Money. We did not all break at the same time. We kind of got a little robbed by the promoter because it had guaranteed 10,000, but that was if we had a full field. We didn't have a full field on the women's side, so the men got the 10,000, and the women got the garbage money. I finished third. I got $300, but Cy and Dolly were kind enough to let me keep it, and they put me in, and I hit the jackpot in the casino. All by myself at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody was on the craps table. Alan Hopkins had a craps game going over there, and they were all rowdy and drunk, and I got away from there because I'm short, you know, and if there's a crowd, it's not a place for me. Yeah, I was over in a corner, and I'd never been in a casino before, and the bell went off. Bells are ringing, lights are flashing. There's 3 sevens in front of me, and I see a security guard coming over to me, and I thought I was in trouble. I didn't know what was going on. And he came over and he said, congratulations. And meanwhile, the coins are pouring out of the machine. And I'm just standing there going, what's going on? He says, you hit the jackpot. And so that was 200, which was a lot of money in 85. So I came home with 500. It's not a bad day on the table. Better than losing 500, right? Cy and Dolly are very good to me. They took me to the buffet so that I didn't have to pay for meals. When I first got down to Atlantic City, you know, you signed in, and then you had the grand ballroom. 3, 6, 9. I think there were 12 tables set up. The men and women were playing together because I had Mizrak on one side of me, and again, Irving Crane. Always seemed to be running into him on the other side of me, and I had a bye in the first round, and then I actually had to play a woman that Bobby Hunt was with, and she wasn't very good, and I was worse. I must have been, you know, one of those times when they play somebody that's so bad that your game falls down to that level. So by the time I got to the semi-quarter, which is first semi, right, up against Billy Billings. Okay, so that's a whole different game. Billy is still playing. Excellent player. She was the president of the WPBA at the time. And I gave her a run for her money in the match. We went 7-5. And it should have been 6-6, but I jarred the 5 ball in the pocket because I hit it too hard. But people were watching. I was in the corner, and they announced me as somebody who had made it to that spot on buys. I was so angry. I went up to the table. I said, I played pool. You know, everybody, 16 players, half the players had at least one bye. I played another match, so it was single elimination, so Billy got me. But I put on a performance. I showed everybody that I wasn't just there on buys, that I could actually hit a ball and move the cue ball around. So I had a little bit of validation, but when I wasn't in the ballroom, upstairs in the green room, it was exactly like it was in The Color of Money, that every table had action going. Because I wanted to hit some balls, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, packed. Tables were going, people were standing on the sides, money was going all over the place, and I was like a kid in a candy store. Where do I want to go? Who do I want to watch, you know? There weren't really any place to sit down, though. So I guess that's why everybody was standing, but it was that busy. There was that group of people like Bobby who would come to a tournament, not to play in the tournament, but to play for the action. And that's how it was down in New London. The tournaments were on the right side, excuse me, and then the left side of the room is where the action was, and then there was those big bleachers that split the room. So, a little bit of both. If I couldn't referee all day, because I didn't sit down. I stood up. I did it, as professional as I had been refereed in my matches, and that's what made Gold Crown so special, was that Ty treated us like pros. A lot of respect. And he was like my second dad in a way. They were Jewish, I was Jewish. So they loved nothing more than having not only a woman that was playing out of their room, but she was Jewish too, and they were very good to me. They were really very good to me, and it broke my heart when they retired in '86. They did let me have the best table in the house with the least amount of cracks. So I have table 17, to anybody that knows Gold Crown Billiards. That's one away from, 18 was next to the men's room, and 17 was the next one over. I think it's the one everybody put their junk on and leaned on to watch. So it was in pretty good condition. And Herbie Lehman, another name, I don't know if you know, he was another player from Connecticut, but he recovered tables back then. And so I had the table, he stored the table for me because our house wasn't finished yet. And then he came up and said, "Hi, Marion, how are you?" I said, "Hi, Herbie," because Herbie liked to drink a little bit. And he was supposed to have stripped it because the old Gold Crown ones had multicolored side panels. I don't know if you've seen them. And he was going to strip it down to where it would be like this, with the wood showing. Well, that never happened. So I said, "Bring me my table." And I don't remember. He put a good cloth on it. I think that in '90, I put Simonis on, because if I was going to play in the tournaments, I wanted my table to have the cloth that I was playing on. For the most part, most rooms were using Simonis by then. And that definitely changed the game. I was able to move the cue ball around a lot more. And, playing Bruce knew how to play three-cushion billiards. So I slowly began to learn to move the cue ball around, a few more rails. Then the jump shot came along, and I had to learn that. And, I can't really jump from the middle of the table. I'm too short. But if it's, near the rail, I could jump. And then I learned how to masse. And it's funny because I have a picture here that I brought, my first ever pro picture that Billy was taking, and she wanted me to do the masse. Those were all the photographs that the way she was doing the women, was sitting on the side of the table, doing the masse shot. Well, I was like Boston Shorty. I had both feet hanging in the air, and there was no way, I couldn't do it. And so she's got me shooting like this, and it's wherever my stuff is. That first picture, that was the first time I shot with my baby over there, and wow, I was so green. Alan Hopkins I was refereeing for, and his opponent made 2 9-balls on the break, and suddenly he was in my face, hanging over my shoulder. I'm trying to rack the balls. Yeah, he's on top, leaning over that far, hanging over, watching me rack. And then, of course, I lift up, we had the old wood racks, and I lifted it up, and, it would roll a millimeter of an inch. Oh, no, that's no good. You got to re-rack them. I spent the major part of that match racking the balls. He lost. He let it get, I don't know. He just, it was the way that went with 9-ball. You had the luck factor. And, somebody, gets up to a jump start where you got a couple of, games on the board. I think the men used to race to 9 in 9-ball, and they used to play to 150 in straight pool. And in the first year that I met Bruce, June was the Eastern States straight pool tournament, and Mizrak and Margot were playing. It was late Saturday evening. So we were getting done. It was a 2-day tournament, and there were a lot of 100+ runs. There just wasn't the opportunity for 150 and out, just because there were a couple turns beforehand. But Margot broke. Mizrak got up to the table, 150 and out. Really? Never seen it before, and It was standing room only. Everybody was watching. People were going crazy. Money's passing all over the place, you know, on the other side of the bleacher. Yeah, is he going to run out? I don't know. What do you think? I'll give you 10, you know, or whatever. And yeah, that was really, really exciting. And it was fun to referee for players like Hopkins. And there was a player out of Jersey named Mike Sika, and I called him the baby powder man. Nobody wore gloves back then. And he traveled with the largest bottle of Johnson's baby powder I'd ever seen in my life. And by the time you got done with a match with him, the entire table, the rails, were covered in baby powder. He was covered in baby powder. You needed a gas mask to get over to the table. There was so much baby powder going on. That man, I don't know, he had apparently sweaty hands that were pretty bad. But I didn't care, you know. Those were my lessons. I was getting paid to learn, and I watched like a hawk and how they worked their way through the situations. And then I would go on to my table, you know, whatever. At that time, I was still shooting out of Gold Crown. And I would just take a shot that they played and practice it until I got it down. And that's, you know, that's how I taught myself. I didn't really have teachers. In the beginning, I had Jerry Breiseth out at Cunique Billiards in Wisconsin. I played in the ACUI college tournament for Michigan State, and the regionals were in Madison, Wisconsin, at the University of Wisconsin. And out there is a pool room called Cunique Billiards, and the owner was Jerry Breiseth. He's somebody who's very well known. I think he even wrote articles in Billiard Digest. And somebody told me to go see him, and I did. And he's the first one that helped me put my stroke together and taught me how to make that shot that Tom Cruise made in The Color of Money. Well, did he turn his head away and make the shot? He had me making the shot with my eyes closed, you know, to make sure that I had the stroke. And once he showed me, it all just clicked in. You know, there was some fine tuning that went on, like the arm, the bent arm, was keeping me too high up, so got that arm straightened out, destroyed my shoulder, destroyed both shoulders playing. There's the line, you know, it was just taking them down. And just the way that I'm built, I had a lot of, you know, what do they call it, repetitive sports injuries from breaking, you know, with a bad back. I was very, very protective. I didn't fly into the air. My feet didn't leave the ground. I broke pretty safe, and that was probably my weakest point of my game. I just could never, always in the back of my mind, I would, don't throw too much into it or your back's gonna go out. And it hindered my game a bit, but again, I was playing with Lyme disease, with a bad back, and still getting the job done. But by '93, I got bitten yet again. I just kept getting bit over and over again on our land. And I couldn't do it anymore. I was in so much pain and so much agony that I took a break again, and I went to my bed. I took to the bed. I said, I'm done. And I lived in my bed. Bruce, you know, got me my meds and my meals, and then there was about a 5-year lag there, and then I came back in and started with the APA. And I lasted with them while Bruce made me the division manager. Bruce played in the league. He went back in for a while, but not APA, a different league, a money league down on the shoreline. But
There's a bunch now.
it's a long night.
Yeah. Being the captain, you feel guilty.
I know.
Early, you know?
Well, when I wasn't feeling well, I would have him go and captain. I really faded out because I wasn't feeling well. I was in pain. I still had that high handicap.
Yeah.
So I had to come out shooting. I didn't have the opportunity that a three guy playing 9-ball who had the break of you know, an elephant, you know?
Johnny Archer.
Yeah, you know, Bustamante is the one that I remember.
Bustamante, yeah.
He literally comes off the floor and was halfway in the air. And, So they would break like that, make 5 balls on the break, and they're threes. I think the men had to be at least a 3. I don't think there were any 2s as far as men go. Maybe there weren't any 1s.
Right.
But I had somebody that I knew from New London that I used to play with show up down at the state tournament from a bar in New London or Norwich, and I was a 7 and 9 ball. I said, Phil, what's your, I see on the paper, I said, Phil, you're a 6? Okay, you used to beat me. We used to gamble together, remember? You were about 50-50. But, and of course I ended up having to play Phil, and I hadn't been playing, and by that time, I was on pain medication. I finally gave in and said, I have to do something here to try to function. And at that time, I was on morphine. I was on MS-Contin, which was the sister to OxyContin. And while it took away the pain, it also took away my brain. And I missed a straight-in shot in the side. And I cost my team the state championship, and that was it. I was done. And then 04, I started treating heavy for the Lyme, and I went down big time for that. 2.5 years of round after round after round of antibiotics, and you react to the antibiotics. You have after chemo, and they were tearing me apart, and we were traveling all the way down to Wilton to see my Lyme doctor and the pain doctors, and we were traveling all over the place for trying to find someone that would recognize that I did indeed have Lyme disease, because they were denying it, that it existed. And I gave up. I couldn't do it. I still played in my basement, with socially, with friends and that, but.
How about breaking the cue after losing? Is this the one you broke?
No, that wasn't me.
Oh.
Well, I did break this.
Okay.
I had a temper tantrum, and I used to see some players would slam their cues when they were mad. I was, a copycat. So I said, okay, I'm going to have a temper. This is before I learned not to have a temper. And I slammed that into the ground, and I broke the butt on it. And, like I was talking before, my brother-in-law put a brass butt on the bottom, and I sent it back to black, and he almost had heart failure. What did you do to my cue? And so he fixed it back up for me. We got it balanced up again. But down in Gold Crown Billiards, the way, if you've never been there, it was kind of in a shopping center that sloped down. So there was a long set of stairs that brought you up to like Burlington, and they were tucked right in the corner there. And in the corner was a big metal trash can with like the old style trash cans with the domed lid. That thing was so dented because when anybody lost, they would grab a house cue, take it outside, and smash it over the top of the trash can. And it got to the point where they would just come up to the counter, slap a 10 on the counter, and go out the door and break cues in the whatever that area was called. And it was funny. I don't know if they did it one side, because Bruce was a houseman there for a while when we first met. And I got him off the bar boxes and back on the big tables, and he grew up playing in Brooklyn, on the big tables. So he was houseman there for a while, and he got very good. He actually won a tournament against the players, all the best players in that room, and we had some characters down there. Cliff, I know Bobby mentioned Cliff with the Batmobile, and we had one, Norman Silver Lake. He was often at Norwich State Hospital. When they let him out, he'd come down and shoot like God. And so he was a regular down there. The Bobby would come down and play. And there's just a ton of action that went on in that room of people coming in from around the area. And that's how I met. Well, I grew up playing Carlos Vieira. I don't know if you know that name. Yeah. He passed away, it's been 6 years now. And I played his brother, Manny. It's another person that humored me and played straight pool with me down in East Hartford. And we kind of became a couple friends, Bruce and Carlos and Jamie and I. And everything changed when he passed away. He was so young. I remember meeting Ginky, George Sansucci, with Robbie Sayers. They all came into Players' Choice. I think Robbie was 19, Tommy, Seminar. I don't even think he was old enough to come in the room by himself because it was a liquor license. He had to come in with his dad. He was 16, and Bobby would be there. And then the old man, Paulie, from Milford Rec that Bobby talked about. Paulie used to come down. He was always nice to me. I didn't know he was in the mob. I was so naive about who these people were. I knew there was action going on. I know that Bobby always had a bankroll in his pocket because he would always pull it out. And everybody always used to make jokes about, hey, is that a Boston bankroll? A 20 on the outside, one's all in the middle. And that's kind of been an ongoing joke with us. Sorry, Bobby, but he did like to wave his bankroll out there, and it was funny. He didn't play much, though. He had certain people he wanted to play. He had certain games he wanted to play, and he didn't want to, he didn't need to play. If he could get a game, he got a game. And if he didn't, he'd sit around and kind of, rule the place as the gambler, the hustler, although I never really saw anybody that got tricked, except maybe stupid people that came in with a lot of money and wouldn't quit when they should have, and then they would always make the jokes, they'd throw out the fishing rod, got one, we got a fish. There was this kid from EB, and he had a $60,000 workers' comp settlement because, he hurt his arm or something, and he used to come in every day, and they would line up, try to get to him. They'd clean him out, he'd come back. He came back until he ran through that whole 60,000, and then he disappeared. Then I just was amazed that the people that would do that, he was okay. He was a C player, though, and he wasn't at their level, and it didn't matter to him. He just wanted the action. So that would be entertaining. So even if I wasn't playing, there were all the railbirds, lined up on the wall, and I always grabbed my seat, in the front, because I'm short and I can't have anybody standing in front of me. And sometimes I held the money, and then we'd have the ring games would start down there, playing 3-ball. Those would get pretty big, actually, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you wanted to play, you were in. $1 for each, the 3, 5, 7, and then 2 for the 9. And there was a lot of that going around. They were playing a lot of golf. I don't even remember how that game played.
I remember it, I just don't remember how it
Yeah, I don't, but that was another big gambling game. And then, of course, the one pocket. Nobody was really playing straight pool anymore. And 9-ball was contentious for the higher level players because of the luck factor. I know that really bothered Bobby, and to some degree Carlos as well. But Carlos used to have a table in his basement, and he had runs of 300 on more than one occasion. He'd be down there practicing when we'd go over, and Jamie would say, oh yeah, he just ran 250, 320. He was quite a good straight pool player. And unfortunately, the game disappeared, even for the men. It didn't work for TV. It's boring. If you don't know how to play that game, it's boring to watch. And the better the player, the more boring it looks because they make everything look easy.
Right.
So there was a lot of change in the dynamics of the game, and unfortunately, the professional organizations were run by the players. And when I came into the WPBA, Billy Billings was the president, but there was a little bit of a power struggle going on. And in my first tournament, I'm stuck in the middle of this other women that wanted to be the president, and Billy coming over and being my friend and taking my picture and, you know, telling me that she was going to be the president. And I'm like, what? Did I just walk into the middle of here? And she pretty much stayed president until Belinda Bearden then took over the WPBA for a while. And that's about when I left. And then Frank Crimmy took it over for a while. And then I don't know what happened to it. But the problem was is they didn't have anybody to get a sponsor for us. When we played the '84 Nationals up in the Catskills, our sponsor was Carlton Slim Cigarettes. So, but that was a nice tournament. That was a fun tournament because there was a kosher hotel. And me and Cy and Dolly were the only Jews there. And you know, they were trying to get milk with their dinners, and they put gefilte fish down in front of them. And it was amusing to watch these young ladies who weren't familiar with kosher food being forced to eat that, because it was all family-style meals. You know, this was all included in, you know, back in those days. So that's when I beat Lori John in that tournament, first round, on my birthday, with Bruce refereeing. I don't know what happened to her, you know. It's strange, you know. First matches are always king swing, not the way you would think. Nobody would have ever thought that I was going to beat Lori John. She had just come off that world tournament in New Jersey, and she won it and beat Belucas. And actually, the same thing happened to me. After I won the Connecticut State Championship, I was ranked #1, excuse me, on the All About Pool Tour. And I had never been #1 before on paper, and I thought about it, and I said, well, you're supposed to be disabled, for one thing, and once you reach #1, there's no place else to go but down. And I kind of had a very strange existential, like, a little bit negative, but you know, again, the Lyme disease was really interfering, but I wasn't accepting it. I just kept pushing through and pushing through and pushing through, and I'd come home from the tournaments and I'd collapse for a week, but then I'd be back out again. I was like the Energizer battery. You couldn't take me down. I just, in the pool room every night. If I didn't get a game, I was a pinball addict. That's actually how I started playing pool, because I was feeding those machines way too many quarters when I was at Michigan State. And so anywhere I went where if I couldn't get a game, Cy had a pinball machine, and he had a Pac-Man and a Donkey Kong. And I put the high score up on the pinball, I put the high score up on the Pac-Man, and I blew away everybody on the Donkey Kong. And I remember one night Mike Zuglin came over, and he was watching, and I said, you know, do you want to play? So he throws his quarter in, and I'm having one of those rounds where I'm going 20 minutes playing the game, and I'm kind of looking over my shoulder, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you know, I didn't know this was going to happen. But he was actually really cool about it, and I did kick his butt, and it was fun. Anytime I played pinball, nobody could touch me. When I played at Michigan State in the old pinball machines, the old days, they weren't computerized, and you actually, when you won a game, you'd get that click. And that was like, for me, I mean, it was just such an adrenaline rush. And there was a pinball machine called the Elton John and Pinball Wizard. And I think one time I had 25 games racked up. And I was supposed to be working in the pool room, and I was supposed to be studying, you know, because I had my books and everything all laid out. And the way it was, like the counter was in the middle, and then we had, I think, 10 gold crowns. We had 2 regulation snooker tables, and then we had a billiard table. And I took billiards as a class. There was a class at Michigan State, a 1-credit elective. And that was my senior year. And it was at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I was out every night. I wasn't the best student in college. I wanted to play pool. I didn't want to go to class. I was studying to be a medical technologist. I was in a pre-med curriculum. We were down at the pool room. Phil, the gentleman I played in the state tournament, and this other guy, Rich, that was one of the players in the room, and we were, looking for something to do. There was nothing that happened in the pool room, and we went down to Mabry's, which is an old hotel and bar down at Ocean Beach in New London. It's been there forever. My sister even went there in the early days, and they had about 2 or 3 tables in there, and Phil was, African American, let's use the politically correct title, and he played this guy that actually Bruce knew from Electric Boat, and he beat him more than one game. I don't know if they were gambling or not, but George let the N-word fly, and Phil went crazy, and he took a house cue and he just cracked him right over the head, right with the middle of the cue. The cue broke. Blood is pouring down George's head, and I'm sitting here going, this isn't looking good right now. And we're at Mabry's is practically on the water, so there's only one way out, up Ocean Avenue. I mean, to the north. And I said, I think we ought to go. I think he had a bit of a concussion because he was just kind of stunned. I mean, it was a great hit. He nailed the hit. But yeah, so I'm driving in the getaway car, and as we're going down Ocean Avenue, the police, the ambulance is coming down. I know they're going to the bar, and I think I finally got my heart back in my chest about a half hour later. And I said, oh my God, I'm a good girl. I'm not gonna, even though I wasn't involved in the fight, I was there with them. And that's the worst I've ever seen anybody get injured over the game of pool. I mean, I've seen verbal arguments, but never, I don't know, I feel, yeah, well, we got away. I thought for sure they were going to turn around and follow me. They had my car description. I wasn't the type of person that would do good getting arrested.
You never got called out for it, huh? They never found out who it was? No way.
They didn't know us.
Good thing, right?
Yes, and I never went back either, because I'll never forget that. Usually they in the pool room, they busted a house cue out on the trash can. They're not over somebody's head. And yeah, it wasn't long after that the pool room shut down. So things like that ended.